The moon they had polished for her coronation hung like a coin above Moonspire Keep, bright and pitiless. Isadora stood on the oath dais in white ceremonial linen, bare feet on cold stone, waiting for the last words that would make her Luna. Her hands shook anyway, not from fear of rule. She had been trained for council law, border accords, winter stores, blood claims since she could read. Not from the gathered alphas below, bristling in clan colors. From him. Her fated mate stood 3 paces away, jaw tight, eyes refusing to settle on hers. The bond call had struck both of them at first moon the week prior, hot and undeniable. She had gone to sleep with relief in her chest, thinking the gods, at least, had not abandoned her bloodline. Then he lifted his voice so the whole hall could hear. "I reject Isadora Stoneheart," he said, each word sharp enough to skin bone. "I reject her blood, her claim, and any bond between us. She is barren blood and unfit for throne or pack." The hall did not gasp. It hissed. Someone laughed, short and ugly. Someone else whispered, "Barren before she's even crowned. Omen." Isadora forgot how to breathe. The rejection hit like a blade under the ribs, spiritual and physical at once. The bond thread that had barely formed snapped back, searing through her chest. Her knees bent. She caught herself before she fell, because they were all watching. Her mother's brother, Griffin Thornwood, rose from the regent's seat in dark fur and iron, solemn as a priest at burial. He did not look surprised. That should have told her everything, but shock makes fools of the trained. "By old law," Griffin said, voice carrying across stone and silver banners. "A rejected bride of the ruling line may not remain within central borders. At dawn she is cast out, rank stripped, name shamed, so spoken by regent authority." "My claim is by blood, not by marriage," Isadora forced out. Her throat tasted metallic. "You cannot void it with a broken mating." Griffin looked almost tender. "Watch me." He snapped his fingers. 2 wardens came up behind her. One tore the moon clasp from her shoulder. Fabric ripped, taking skin with it. The other yanked the half-set coronet from her hair and let it ring against the floor at Griffin's boots. "Please," an elder female murmured from the lower benches, not to help Isadora, but to stop the spectacle. "Do this privately." "Law is public," Griffin replied. By midnight she was in a holding cell beneath the east tower, still in ripped linen, wrists bound with wolfsbane thread that made her skin welt. By pre-dawn she was thrown beyond the gate with a travel sack of stale bread. No cloak, no escort, no name. The gates shut behind her before sunrise. She stood in frost and mud, one hand over her stomach as nausea rolled through her. She had not bled with the moon in 2 months. She had told no one yet. She did not know if it was grief, stress, or the impossible. 3 weeks later, starving in the frost wild, she knew. Labor took her in a collapsed hunter lean-to while sleet hissed through broken boards. No midwife, no fire but damp kindling. Pain split her down to marrow and kept splitting. She bit her own wrist to stop screaming when scouts passed too near. When the child finally slid free into her shaking hands, the world went silent, then flooded back with a thin, outraged cry. A daughter. Silver-furred even in newborn softness, eyes closed tight, tiny fists fighting air. Isadora laughed once, then sobbed so hard she almost dropped her. On the pup's left forepaw, in the center pad, sat a pale crescent sigil as clean as ink. She scrubbed at it with thaw water until the skin reddened. It did not fade. By the time she reached a border market to trade her last ring for goat milk, 2 hunters had already seen the mark while the pup rooted at her breast. "Moon rot," one muttered, spitting. "Crescent-born. That's curse stock." "Not curse," Isadora said through cracked lips. "Royal." "Worse," the other said. She ran again before they could follow. 2 days after that, in a village square where she hid beneath a cart awning and prayed no one recognized her face, the palace seer's decree was read aloud by drumcaller. The crescent-marked whelp born to the disgraced Isidora is aberrant and dangerous. Any who harbor mother or child harbor blight against the realm. The crowd crossed themselves to the moon. Then the second line came. Lower. Like the caller wished he could swallow it. Ancient records confirm the crescent sigil belongs to the direct royal line. This is the first legitimate heir mark recorded in 50 years. Silence hit the square. Then, noise exploded. Heir? Impossible. Griffin said the line was dying by fate. Get the guards. Isidora was already moving, clutching her daughter under her torn cloak, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. Curse, heir, blight, legitimate. None of it mattered to the men who would come with ropes and decrees. Her child had become not a baby but a claim, and claims got killed. She hid that night in a cooper's shed behind stacked barrels, body wrecked from birth and flight, milk soaking through fabric gone stiff with old blood. She dozed in jolts, waking every time the pup made a sound. At dawn she found one heel split open, both hands swollen and the edges of her vision darkening from hunger. She was 24 and felt 90. By noon, Griffin's riders entered the village. They wore regent black with thorn branch sigils and carried silvered spears meant for wolves, not people. Their captain unrolled a decree and nailed it to the well-post with a hunting knife. By order of Regent Thornwood, he shouted, the cursed whelp will be surrendered for cleansing at Eclipse Rite. Any nursing mother withholding aid to the search will be treated as traitor. A woman beside Isidora, a baker with flour on her elbows and a baby tied to her chest, blanched. Cleansing? She whispered. That means sacrifice. The captain kept reading. To ensure compliance, 3 nursing mothers from border holdings have been taken into protective custody. First household resisting search loses 1 hostage at moonrise. Someone in the crowd began to cry. Isidora did not. She went very cold, very still, the way prey freezes when hawk shadow crosses the field. This was no longer a hunt for one disgraced woman. Griffin was building fear into ritual, turning milk and cradle into leverage. If she stayed hidden among villages, others would pay in blood for each hour she bought. She slipped away before the patrol started door searches. In the cooper's shed, she wrapped the pup tighter, tucked the last of the stale bread into her sack, and stared at the cracked wall while her daughter suckled with frantic little pulls. Options, she told herself. Think. South led back to Moonspire and certain capture. East was open plain with no cover. West was mountain and winter, likely death. North held ruined watch shrines and old Windrider roots. Exile territory, if rumors were true. Men loyal to no regent, led by a war alpha who had refused court summons for years. Darius Windrider, scarred, ruthless, oath hard. A ghost story to keep reckless young wolves in line. Also, according to 3 separate traders she had overheard while pretending to sleep by their fire. One thing only made him dangerous to enemies and safe to supplicants. He did not break blood law once he spoke it. Isidora kissed the damp crown of her daughter's head. Then we beg a law-bound wolf, she whispered, because lawless men already want you on a stone altar. She left before sunset. The forest swallowed sound fast under new snow. Branches clawed her face. Every few steps she listened for pursuit. Tack Creek, shouted orders, hounds. Once she heard horns far behind and dropped flat beneath fir roots, while 2 mounted scouts passed on the ridge, their torchlight sliding red through tree trunks like open wounds. Her body kept threatening collapse. Her hips still ached from labor. Each downhill step sent a knife through her pelvis. Her breasts burned with letdown whenever the baby cried. Blood from her cracked heel seeped into her boot. Warm at first, then clammy. She counted breaths to stay upright. 50 steps. Pause. 50. Pause. Near midnight, she reached Blackroot Stream, half frozen and fast. The stepping stones were glazed with ice. She strapped her daughter tight against her chest, muttering apologies, and waited. Water punched the air from her lungs. By the far bank, her legs were numb and the pup was wailing from cold. Shh, shh, little moon, Isadora gasped, stripping off her outer wrap to cocoon the baby, taking the wind on her own skin. Her teeth rattled hard enough to hurt. Almost there. Stay with me. Above the river, carved into a standing rock split by lightning, she finally saw it. A weathered hawk crest crossed by 3 wind lines. Windrider boundary. Relief and terror arrived together so violently, she had to brace one hand on the stone. She had made it into another Alpha's territory carrying a claimant child and a regent's death warrant. This was either salvation or a different shape of execution. Dawn bled gray over the ridges as she climbed toward an abandoned watch shrine built into the mountain shoulder. Half the roof had fallen in. Moon mosaics were shattered under frost. Good line of sight, bad comfort. She ducked inside anyway when she heard dogs in the distance. The pup had gone frighteningly quiet, exhausted into tiny hiccup breaths. Isadora set her down on her cloak and fumbled with a flint. Sparks died in damp tinder. Her fingers were so numb she dropped the striker twice. On the third try, it skittered, slicing her wrist on broken slate. Blood welled bright. She cursed under her breath and pressed the cut against her skirt, eyes stinging with frustration. If Scout smelled blood... Bootsteps sounded at the entrance. Not one pair. 3. Isadora snatched up her daughter and backed toward the inner wall, knife out though her grip shook. 2 men in gray fur mantles filled the doorway, crossbows up. Windrider insignia on their collars. Real. Armed. Unsympathetic. The taller scout sniffed, gaze dropping to the bundle. That her? Crescent pup? Stay back, Isadora rasped. Please, I'm invoking shelter under border law. Border law? The other scout barked a laugh. From what rank? From none, she almost said. From stripped name and torn skin and a crown kicked across the stone. Before either man could move, a third figure stepped in behind them, and the cramped air changed. He was broader than the doorway, shoulders filling it, dark hair tied at the nape, winter stubble shadowing a hard mouth. A scar ran from the edge of his jaw down into his collar like old lightning. His eyes were the pale gold of a wolf on high alert, and when those eyes landed on her, something in her chest tightened so abruptly she staggered. "Leave us," he said without looking at his men. "Alpha," the tall one began. "Now." They went, reluctant but immediate. The stranger, Darius, it had to be, stepped closer, gaze flicking from her face to the blood running down her wrist, to the child tucked against her shaking body. He smelled of cedar smoke, steel oil, storm rain. Her pulse spiked in answer before her mind could name why. "Don't touch her," Isadora said, baring her teeth around the words. "I'll kill you first." A rough sound left him, not quite a laugh, not quite a growl. "You can barely stand." He moved anyway, fast, controlled, and caught her bleeding wrist before she could jerk back. His hand closed over hers, calloused palm pressing the wound. The world detonated. Heat shot up Isadora's arm and through her spine, white-hot and exquisite, as if thunder had found bone. The ruined shrine sharpened into impossible detail. Ash flecks in his hair, the pulse in his throat, the rasp of his breath. A bond thread she thought dead roared awake in her chest and yanked hard enough to fold her at the knees. Darius recoiled like he'd been struck. His eyes flashed fully wolf gold. "No," he snarled, voice hoarse with something between fury and fear. "No," he snarled, voice hoarse with something between fury and fear. His grip loosened just enough for her to wrench her hand back, But the damage was done. The bond did not retreat this time. It coiled tighter, burning bright under her skin, a living thread pulling from sternum to sternum until she could map him by sensation alone. His heartbeat, hard and uneven, the sharp drag of his breath through clenched teeth, the violent control in the set of his shoulders. Isadora hit the wall behind her and clutched her daughter tighter, as if pressure could shield the pup from a force she could not stab or outrun. Darius stared at her like she was a blade at his throat. "No," he said again, lower. "That's not possible." "Don't!" Her voice broke. She swallowed and tried again. "Don't do this to me." He blinked once, as though the words had cut through something. "Do what?" "Pretend you don't feel it." The old humiliation came up bitter in her mouth. "If you're going to reject me, then do it quickly and get out of my sight." His jaw flexed. For a heartbeat, she thought he might. Her wolf, ragged from injury and childbirth and exile, stirred anyway, traitor soft at the edges, reaching toward his scent like warmth in winter. Darius took one step back instead of forward, both palms visible. "I'm not your former mate," he said. "I don't perform cruelty for an audience." Her laugh came out thin and unbelieving. "No audience needed. You have leverage enough." His gaze flicked to the baby. She saw him notice the crescent mark where tiny toes peeked from cloth. Something dark passed over his face. "Isadora Stoneheart," he said slowly, tasting the name like confirmation. "You are carrying the storm every alpha in this realm has been waiting to weaponize." She tightened her grip on the knife. "Then decide whether you're one of them." The bond pulsed hot between them, a silent insistence. He inhaled sharply and his eyes flared gold again. Not hunger. Recognition. Rage at recognition. When he spoke, his voice had gone rougher. "I was told if I ever took a mate, she'd drag me toward the throne fate I've spent 10 years avoiding." His mouth twisted. "Prophets love dramatic warnings." Isadora's scalp prickled. "So that's what this is? You're afraid I'm inconvenient to your future?" "I'm afraid," he said, and the honesty of it startled them both. "That everyone around me dies when the throne gets involved." Silence rang between broken shrine pillars. Outside, wind slid over stone with a low, hunting moan. Her wrist started bleeding again. Darius looked at it, then at her face, asking without asking. She hesitated, then gave one short nod. He moved with deliberate slowness, tore a strip from his own inner sleeve, and wrapped her wrist without touching more skin than necessary. Still, every brush lit sparks up her arm. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She hated that her body knew him before trust had a chance to grow. "Listen carefully," he said, knotting the bandage one-handed. "If I meant to claim authority, you'd already know. I sent my scouts out because they came in with crossbows pointed at a bleeding mother." His mouth flattened. That offended me. Something in her chest eased a fraction despite herself. A cry rose from the bundle, her daughter rooted blindly, exhausted and hungry. Isadora fumbled with her torn bodice, hands clumsy with cold and adrenaline. Milk had dropped hours ago and dried. The baby fussed harder. Darius looked away at once and stepped toward the doorway, giving her his back. "Feed her. I'll stand watch." She did, trembling, eyes on the scarred line of his shoulders while her pup latched and sucked in frantic little pulls. The bond hummed, not gentle, not calm, but present, like a taut wire singing in high wind. When the baby finished, Isadora shifted her against her chest and said, "Why did you say no?" He didn't turn. "Because yes changes everything." He glanced over then, and their eyes locked fully for the first time since the impact. The shrine, the cold, the blood on stone, all of it thinned to that look. In his she saw the same impossible split she felt in herself. Instinct reaching, reason resisting, old wounds baring teeth at new hope. He broke eye contact first and called toward the slope below, voice carrying like command steel. Taven, Lark, new orders. No one enters this shrine without my word. A faint answer came from the trees. Darius faced her again, expression carved flat by effort. You and your daughter are under Windrider's shelter tonight. Not capture. Shelter. Isadora's fingers tightened around her knife anyway. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, he said. We decide who has to bleed to keep her alive. By full dark, the wind had sharpened enough to whistle through the broken roof. Darius built a fire in the shrine's least collapsed corner and hung a dented pot over it. His scouts had left supplies and withdrawn to the lower ridge, far enough to grant privacy, close enough to answer alarm. Isadora did not sit until her legs gave out. She settled with her back to stone, daughter tucked skin to skin beneath her cloak. Every instinct screamed to stay awake, but fatigue dragged at her eyelids in hard, ugly surges. Across the fire, Darius crouched over the pot with the concentration of a field medic disarming a trap. Goat milk, he said without looking up. From the lower herders. Your daughter needs more than what you can give right now. You're depleted. The word landed without judgment. Depleted. Not failing. He poured a little into a shallow spoon, cooled it with his breath, then tipped a drop onto the inside of his wrist. Tested. Waited. Tested again. Isadora watched, wrong-footed by the care in it. He glanced up once. If she takes it, she takes it. If not, we don't force. He extended the spoon but did not approach. May I? No one had asked her permission for anything in months, maybe years. She hesitated, then shifted her daughter toward him by inches, ready to snatch the pup back at the smallest misstep. Darius moved like a man handling blown glass, massive hands improbably gentle as he supported the baby's head. The little silver-furred mouth opened, protested, then accepted the spoon in tiny, determined sips. There you go, little hawk, he murmured, voice gone unexpectedly soft. Fierce appetite. Isadora felt tears sting and hated them. When the pup slept again, milk-drunk and warm, Darius handed her back and turned to practicalities with military briskness. Your cloak is torn at both shoulder seams. If we move at first light, she'll lose heat. He took the garment only after she nodded, then sat cross-legged just beyond Fireglow and began mending it with a bone needle from his kit. His fingers were scarred and blunt. The stitches came out neat anyway. He added a broad strap from spare leather, threading it so the cloth formed a sling cradle across her chest. Isadora fought sleep, lost. Came awake with a violent jerk an hour later, knife half drawn, breath sawing. Darius was exactly where he had been, only closer to the fire now, cloak in his lap. He froze when she snapped upright, then deliberately lowered his gaze and looked away to the broken wall, giving her space to gather herself. You're safe, he said quietly. No one came near. Her heart still pounded like pursuit drums. I don't wake well. I noticed. Humor ghosted the words, gentle as snowfall. No mockery. He rose and set the finished sling beside her instead of placing it on her body. Try that when you're ready. It'll keep her against your heart and your hands free. Isadora traced the stitching with one finger. Strong work. Reinforced where weight would pull. Made for travel, not show. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. Darius frowned. Why what? Why this? She gestured at the milk, the mending, the careful distance. You could have taken advantage at 10 different moments. Claimed rank, claimed bond, claimed whatever right men like you invent when women are cornered. Something hard flashed in his face, anger not at her, but at the world that made the question reasonable. He crouched so they were eye level, keeping an arm's length between them. Because I learned early what power does when it's only force, he said. Because I swore after the war that I would never become the kind of alpha I had to kill. His gaze held hers. And because no one decides your worth at knife point or altar. The words hit her harder than the bond had. For a second she couldn't speak. Outside, an owl called from the trees. Fire snapped, settled. Isadora put the knife down beside her knee, still within reach, but no longer in hand. I don't know how to trust this. You don't have to tonight, Darius said. You just have to sleep. For the first time since Moonspire's gate slammed behind her, she did. Dawn came mean and colorless. They moved before first light. Isadora wearing the repaired sling crossbody with her daughter tucked snug against her sternum, tiny ear over her heartbeat. Darius walked half a pace ahead through the pine cut, favoring silence over speed, his scouts ranging far enough not to crowd her. By midday the trail narrowed into Blackroot Pass, two walls of volcanic stone rising like clenched fists around the only winter-safe route north. Bad ground for ambush, worse for negotiation. Darius slowed. Stay close. The warning had barely left his mouth when 6 figures stepped from behind basalt outcrops, thorn branch sigils bright on black tabards. Regent Patrol, crossbows already loaded. Their leader, a broad man with ritual ash smeared across his brow, lifted a hand. By Regent decree, surrender the cursed whelp for cleansing. Isadora felt her daughter stir in the sling and went cold clear through. She shifted 1 foot back, measuring distance, exits, angles. None good. Darius moved in front of her in one fluid step, shoulders blocking line of fire. You're in Windrider Passage. Not anymore. The leader smiled without warmth. Eclipse authority supersedes border courtesy. Hand over the bundle and we let the mother keep breathing. One of the younger soldiers peered around Darius and spat near Isadora's boots. Should have drowned it at birth. Before Isadora could lunge, Darius reached up, hooked 2 fingers under his collar, and dragged the fabric down to bare the old bite and brand scars crossing his throat. Rank marks unmistakable even to zealots. Look carefully, he said, voice carrying off rock. You are addressing an alpha under blood law. The patrol faltered. The leader recovered first. You're a self-exiled brute with no seat. I don't need a seat to issue challenge. Darius bared his teeth, not quite shift, all threat. Step forward and make your claim on my sheltered. The air tightened. Wolves understood challenges even when politics pretended otherwise. The leader lifted his chin. Our claim is sanctified cleansing. Your claim is infanticide dressed as ritual. Murmurs broke among the patrol. Behind Darius, Isadora realized his scouts had appeared on the ridge above, bows drawn, arrows tracking throats. Quiet, precise, waiting on their alpha's word. The leader saw them too and swore. You'd start blood feud over one disgraced female and her mongrel pup? Darius did not look back at Isadora when he answered. I'd start war over anyone under my protection. The youngest soldier, sweating and wild-eyed, snapped first. He jerked his crossbow up, not at Darius, at the sling on Isadora's chest. Time fractured. Isadora twisted, arms wrapping hard over her daughter. Darius moved faster. He drove backward into her, using his body as wall just as the bolt loosed. It hit high in his shoulder with a wet, brutal thunk. He grunted once, staggered, and did not fall. Blood spread dark over his gray mantle. He braced his feet, planted between her and every weapon in the pass, and his voice dropped into the register that made wolves obey before thought. You cross me, he said, each word edged in iron. You answer to blood law. No one moved. The young soldier's crossbow clattered from numb fingers. The leader's scent turned acrid with fear. Darius snapped the bolt shaft off near the entry wound without taking his eyes from the patrol. Kneel, he ordered. 3 dropped at once. 2 hesitated, then followed. The leader held out longest, jaw trembling, until a Windrider arrow kissed the skin under his ear, and he sank with a curse. Darius tilted his head toward Isadora, still shield first. Walk. She stared at the blood soaking down his arm. You're hurt. Walk, Isadora. She obeyed, because command and concern sounded identical in him right then. He paced backward at first, facing the kneeling patrol, then turned and escorted her through their circle himself, daring any of them to twitch. Not one did. When they were 10 lengths beyond, he finally swayed. Isadora caught his uninjured side on instinct. He glanced down at her hand on his coat, then at her face. Pain had sharpened his features, but there was a fierce, almost relieved steadiness under it. They saw, he said. She understood. Public and irreversible. Every patrol in the borderlands would hear by nightfall that Darius Windrider had claimed formal protection over Isadora Stoneheart and the crescent-marked heir. To touch them now was to challenge him directly under laws older than Griffin's decrees. Isadora swallowed against a sudden tightness in her throat. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said simply. I did. Ahead, the pass opened toward northern timber and thin winter sun. Behind them, Thornwood men knelt in volcanic dust, disarmed by law they had expected to wield, not face. Isadora shifted her daughter higher in the sling Darius had sewn and kept her hand at his back as they walked. It was not trust yet, but it was the first step toward it. They made it another mile before Darius's steps started to drag. Isadora felt it through the bond before she saw it in his body. The pulse stutter, the hot flare of pain, the iron tang thickening in the air. By the time they reached a narrow shelf cut into the mountainside, where an old signal hut crouched under snow-laden pines, his gray mantle was half black with blood. Taven! Darius barked, voice rougher now. Inside! Bar the south slit! The scout moved fast, hauling the warped door shut behind them. Lark dropped a pack on a table of split cedar and lit 2 oil lamps, throwing hard yellow across stone walls etched with old Windrider root marks. Isadora set her daughter down in a nest of furs and turned on Darius. Sit. He opened his mouth like he might argue, then saw her face and obeyed. The broken bolt had to come out. She snapped her knife over flame, cleaned her hands in spirit, and cut his shoulder seam away, while he held himself rigid and silent. Muscle bunched under scarred skin, the entry wound was angry and deep, just below the clavicle. On 3, she said. Don't count. She pulled. He hissed through his teeth but did not jerk. Blood welled bright. She packed the wound with yarrow paste from Lark's kit and bandaged hard, fingers steady even when hers started shaking after. When she looked up, Darius was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. A sharp rap hit the door. Taven cracked it, then let in a lean runner in Thornwood black, hands bound, lips split, face white with fear. Behind him, Lark carried a leather dispatch satchel marked with the Regent's thorn seal. Captain from the pass, Lark said. He tried to swallow his message tube. Darius stood despite Isadora's glare and took the satchel. The seal broke with a waxy crack. He unfolded the first parchment, scanned it, and went very still. What? Isadora demanded. He handed it over. The top decree was public order. All patrols are authorized to seize the crescent-marked whelp for purification under Eclipse authority. Beneath it, in Griffin's unmistakable hand, was a private addendum. Deliver mother alive, if possible. Child unmarked by steel. Blood must be taken warm at the right stone to bind the coronation. Isadora's stomach lurched. There were more pages. Payment ledgers with initials she recognized. 3 palace seers, 2 ward captains, 1 elder council scribe. Notes beside each entry in Griffin's angular script. False witness secured. Adultery testimony accepted by Hall. Post-birth omens to be declared curse regardless of mark. Her vision tunneled. He forged it, she whispered. The wedding night evidence, the letters, all of it. The captive captain laughed wetly through blood. You think that was the clever part? He tipped his head toward the pages. Read the red strip. Darius snatched the narrow ribbon of parchment from the satchel lining and unrolled it. His jaw locked so hard the muscle ticked. He passed that one to Isadora, too. To Alpha Darius Windrider, it read. Bring me the woman and her pup before moonfall, and receive full command of Thornwood armies under my coming crown. Refuse, and share their sentence when the old line is cut clean. Prophecy has teeth, old wolf. Best choose where they close. At the bottom, Griffin's seal pressed deep enough to scar the paper. The room held its breath. Even the baby went quiet, as if she could smell threat. Isadora lifted her eyes to Darius's. Is this why he pushed my rejection? Her voice scraped raw. Because if I was cast out, no one would question where my child disappeared? Darius nodded once. And because a rejected claimant is easier to call liar than a crowned one. The captive captain smirked, desperate and mean. Regent says when the eclipse cuts full dark, he'll cleanse the line and take the oath stone. Says your brat's blood is the key. Taven slammed him into the wall, forearm to throat. Mind your tongue. Leave him, Darius said. Let him talk. The captain coughed and grinned red. First hostage dies at moonrise if no surrender. Maybe already on the platform by now. Isadora's milk dropped painfully at the words, body answering to mothers she'd never met. Darius turned to Lark. Confirm with the lower beacons. Lark was gone in a heartbeat. When the door shut, the hut felt smaller, the lamplight harsher. Griffin wasn't just hunting in panic anymore. He was executing a sequence. Disgrace, isolate, seize, sacrifice, crown. Planned down to the hour, paid for in bribes and babies. He had stolen law's language and turned it into a blade. And now he'd offered Darius a kingdom to step aside. Snow began to fall thick by late afternoon, muffling the world outside the hut and trapping heat, fear, and scent under one roof. Darius's shoulder kept bleeding through the bandage. Isadora changed it twice, trying not to react when each touch sent that now familiar current skittering along her skin. The bond had sharpened since Blackroot Pass, not softer but more present, like two wolves pacing the same fence line, restless and aware. He sat on a stool while she worked, jaw shadowed, eyes tracking the room's shadows between blinks. Alpha vigilance, she told herself. Not withdrawal, not regret. Still, when the silence stretched too long, she heard old echoes, barren blood, unfit. Watch me. You can take the offer, she said abruptly, tying off fresh linen. If you want. Darius's head snapped toward her. What? Griffin's offer. She kept her gaze on the knot so he wouldn't see the crack in her composure. Safe command. Armies. No thrown noose around your neck if you hand me over. A humorless smile tugged her mouth. Practical men choose survival. He stood so fast the stool scraped stone. Don't ever say that like you believe I might. The bond flared, hot with anger. His, not hers. Protective, insulted, almost wounded. Isadora exhaled shakily. I believed something once, in front of 1,000 witnesses. Darius closed his eyes for one beat, then forced his tone down. I know what was done to you. I also know what I am. He touched the red strip letter on the table with 2 fingers, contempt plain. If Griffin thinks I can be bought with soldiers, he's never listened to a word about me that wasn't fear-drunk gossip. The door banged open. Lark stumbled in, snow crusting her braids, breath smoking hard. Beacon confirmed, she said. Hostages moved to White Hollow Square. First execution at moonrise. Thornwood criers are saying resistance from any nursing household triggers immediate throat cut. Isadora pressed a fist to her sternum. White Hollow was 3 hours south in good weather, 5 in this storm. Lark continued. eyes flicking uneasily to the baby. Also, rumors spreading that Windrider's shelter has gone moon-cursed. 2 outlying families pulled their sons from your patrol lines. She looked at Darius. They're scared, Alpha. Of me, Isadora thought. Of what my child means. Darius didn't flinch. Then we lead from the front where fear can watch and learn. Tavin swore softly at the window slit. More riders on lower ridge, Thornwood colors. Pressure tightened like a vice. They had a wounded Alpha, a newborn heir, panic in their own ranks, hostages on a clock, and an enemy who had anticipated all of it. Darius made decisions with battlefield speed. Tavin, rotate sentries every quarter hour, no one alone. Lark, take 2 and pull every route map for Moonspire understorm conditions. He glanced at Isadora. You stay with me. There should have been comfort in that. Instead, heat climbed her throat, because she wanted to stay with him, because wanting had become dangerous. As the scouts moved, Isadora lifted her daughter from the furs and held her close until the tiny body settled. The baby's silver ear pressed over Isadora's heartbeat. Too fast, too loud. Darius stepped nearer, stopping before touch. We can't outrun this forever. I know. He wants you in hiding because hiding lets him define the story. His gaze was flint. Curse. Blight. Cleansing. He controls language. He controls wolves. Isadora looked up sharply. Then we rip language out of his mouth? Something fierce and approving flashed in his face. Attraction and respect braided so tightly she couldn't separate them. Outside, a horn sounded far below, 1 long note, then 2 short. Signal of patrol movement. Closing. By full dark, the storm eased enough to reveal a fractured moon through racing cloud. They had 1 room left unwatched. The old chapel alcove at the back of the hut. A niche built around a weather-worn moonstone with offerings worn to dust. Lark had taken first wall watch. Tavin was checking traps. For 10 stolen minutes there was only Isadora, Darius, and the soft sleeping breaths of her daughter in the sling. Isadora stood before the moonstone, palms braced on cold rock, trying to steady the tremor in her arms. She didn't hear Darius approach. She felt him through the bond, a low storm current at her back. Your hands are shaking, he said. So are yours. He huffed, almost a laugh. Fair. Silence settled. Intimate not because it was gentle, but because neither of them filled it with lies. At last Isadora said, What exactly did your prophecy say? Darius leaned one shoulder against the opposite wall, expression turned inward. I was 19. Fresh from my first campaign. A seer in Rivergate went moon-white when I touched the oath bowl. He swallowed once. She said, Your mate will carry the old crown in her blood and drag you to the stone where kin scream your name as they die. Isadora's throat tightened. That's not a prophecy. That's a threat with poetry. Maybe. His mouth twisted. I decided not to test it. Refused every court summons. Built my command on border wars, where thrones meant less than winter stores. His eyes found hers. Then you bled on my floor and the bond lit anyway. She looked down at her wrist, at the fresh bandage over the old cut. My first mate called me barren in front of the realm. Turns out I was already carrying a child. Her voice thinned on the memory. I still wake expecting to hear them laugh. Darius crossed the space between them slowly enough for refusal. She didn't step back. He lifted one hand, paused. May I? When she nodded, he cupped the side of her face, thumb rough against her cheekbone, touch so careful it hurt worse than force. The bond surged warm and aching, no longer thunder, something deeper. Recognition with nowhere to hide. You're not what they named you, he said. Not barren, not cursed, not discarded. Something in her cracked open. She leaned into his palm before pride could stop her. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Any of it. Trust, bond, ruling. I only know how to keep moving. Then keep moving, he said, just not alone. His forehead touched hers, a wolf gesture older than crowns. Breath mingled. For one suspended heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stayed there, letting the choice remain hers. Isadora closed her eyes. Her walls didn't fall all at once. They shifted, stone by stone. She set her free hand over his heart, felt the hard beat under scar and muscle, and let herself believe, just for that breath, that chosen might be possible where forced had nearly destroyed her. A scream tore the moment apart. Not from outside the hut, from the main room. They broke apart and ran. Taven was on his knees, choking, one hand clawing at his throat, where black smoke curled from a shattered clay vial at his feet. Lark was half-shifted, fangs bared, pinning a stranger in Windrider gray to the table, except the gray tabard was too new, insignia stitched wrong. Infiltrator. The stranger's hand shot toward the sling where Isadora's daughter slept. Darius hit him like a battering ram, shoulder first, driving him into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. A thin silver needle clattered from the man's sleeve. Wolfsbane oil glistened on the tip. Isadora went ice cold. He was going to dose her. Lark slammed the infiltrator's wrist until bone popped. He screamed and tried to bite his own tongue. Darius caught his jaw, fingers iron. Try it and I'll break every tooth first. Outside, horns erupted. 3 rapid blasts from the south ridge. Alarm. Attack. Taven managed a ragged. Smoke was a signal. 2 flashes from tree line. Arrows punched through the shuttered slit, one burying in the far beam, another skimming Lark's arm. She cursed and shifted fully, fur rippling over muscle as she lunged for the door bar. It exploded inward before she reached it. Thornwood zealots flooded the threshold behind a ram shield, faces ash-marked, chanting purification rites like battle hymns. Behind them, in the yard, torchlight revealed at least 30 more and a portable right frame lashed to poles, silver chains hanging from it like butcher hooks. They had not come to skirmish. They had come to seize. "Back room!" Darius roared. Isadora grabbed her daughter and sprinted for the chapel alcove as Darius and Lark met the first wave head-on. Claws, steel, splintered wood, blood spray. The hut became impact and howl. A zealot broke through left flank, eyes fixed on the sling. Isadora shifted mid-stride, bones snapping, skin rippling to wolf in a burst of pain and fury, and took him at the knee. They went down together. She tasted blood, hot and copper slick, and tore free before a spear tip kissed her ribs. Human again, she scrambled behind the moonstone just as Taven slammed a hidden latch. A narrow stone panel ground open. Old escape shaft, barely shoulder-wide. Darius appeared in the smoke, blood down his arm, one eye swelling, grin feral and terrifying. "Go! I'm not leaving you. You are if you want her breathing." He shoved a wrapped bundle into her free hand, the thorn-sealed satchel, Griffin's letters inside. "Take this. Proof matters." Another crash shook the hut. The front wall was giving. Lark, bleeding from 3 cuts, shouted from the doorway. "More incoming! They've got the ridge!" From outside came a crier's amplified howl, magic carried and cruelly clear over battle noise. "By order of Regent Thornwood, first hostage dies at moonrise, second dies when dawn breaks. Bring the crescent whelp to White Hollow, or watch mothers bleed in sequence." Isadora's heart slammed against her ribs. Moonrise was minutes away. Darius seized her shoulders, forcing her focus to him through smoke and chaos. "Shaft leads to the North Ravine. Taven takes you. I'll hold rear and meet at Crow's Tooth." "You're wounded." "I'm Alpha," he snapped, then softened by a fraction. "Chosen shelter means I stand between." Another ram hit. Stone cracked. Zealots poured through chanting, "Cleanse the line! Cleanse the line!" Taven grabbed Isadora's elbow, coughing hard. Now! She looked once at Darius, at blood, scar, gold-lit eyes, unyielding stance, and saw the impossible truth. If she obeyed, she might save her child and lose him. If she stayed, she might lose all of them. The moon broke free of cloud through the shattered roof, silvering the room like a blade. From the South Valley, a distant crowd roar rose as White Hollow's execution drums began. Isadora clutched her daughter, the satchel of proof, and stepped into the dark throat of the escape shaft as the wall behind them finally gave way. Stone dust scraped Isadora's palms as she crawled, one arm wrapped around her daughter, the other dragging the thorn-sealed satchel through the narrow black throat of the escape shaft. Behind her, the hut roared with splintering timber and battle howls. Ahead, Taven's boots thudded and slipped in the dark. "Almost there," he rasped back. "Drop on my mark." Cold air knifed through the opening as they spilled into the north ravine. Snow hit her face. Moonlight silvered the cliffs. She had just enough time to breathe once before Lark vaulted down from a boulder, blood matted in her fur where she'd shifted back to human. "South Slope is crawling," Lark said. "Right wagons are moving to Moonspire, hostages with them." Not White Hollow, then. Public stage? Bigger audience? Griffin wanted the realm watching, a shadow detached from the pines. Darius staggered into the ravine, shoulder bandage soaked through, one cheek split open, eyes bright with pain and fury. "You're alive," Isadora breathed. "Disappointed?" he said, and bared bloodied teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. Then his face hardened. "They weren't raiding for you alone. Griffins called an emergency eclipse moot at Moonspire Keep. Every clan leader within half a day is already there." He looked at the baby in her sling, then at the satchel in her hand. "If he gets that right under witness," he said, "he'll turn murder into law." Taven spat into the snow. "Then we hit the convoy and cut hostages loose." Isadora's body surged toward yes, toward immediate rescue, toward the nearest fire. But the image of drums in White Hollow, now moving to Moonspire, collided with the words in Griffin's letter. Blood must be taken warm at the right stone to bind the coronation. One convoy would not end him. One skirmish would not undo 50 years. She looked up at Moonspire's jagged silhouette on the distant ridge, black against the eclipse-bruised sky, and knew what hiding had cost already. "No," she said. All three turned. "We don't cut around him again. We go through him." Her voice steadied as she heard it aloud. "I was cast out by old law. He used that law to bury every child after me. If I challenge him at the moot under full moon, he can't silence me." Darius's gaze sharpened. "Mother's claim." She nodded once. "And I don't walk in empty-handed. This," she lifted the satchel, "proves bribery, not infanticide." Lark swore softly. "You need the Regent Vault." Isadora swallowed. The Regent Vault sat beneath the western archive tower of Moonspire Keep, warded and guarded and very nearly impossible to breach. "I know a servant's aqueduct under the old cistern," she said. "My nurse used it to sneak me sweet cakes when my tutors locked me in with tax tablets." Her mouth flattened. "It opens 3 corridors from the vault." Darius stepped closer, the bond between them pulsing taut and hot. "Too dangerous." She met his eyes. "So is letting him kill another child while we argue." He held her stare for a long, hard breath. Then he dipped his head once, Alpha conceding command in the space she claimed. "Fine," he said. "You take Taven and get your ledger. Lark and I hit the south gate loud enough to drag guards off the archive wing. Once you have proof, go straight to the Oath Hall. Don't wait for me." The thought of going into Moonspire without him made her chest tighten like a fist. She didn't let it show. "Meet me there," she said. His answer was rough and immediate. "Always." Moonspire Keep smelled like her childhood and betrayal. Wet stone, torch smoke, iron polish, old cedar beams. The aqueduct tunnel vomited Isadora and Taven into a storage crypt beneath the Western Archive. They moved through shadow and dripping arches while bells above tolled for the eclipse moot. Twice they flattened behind wine casks as wardens ran past toward the southern alarms Darius and Lark had started. At the vault antechamber, 2 guards stood over a rune-locked door. Taven ghosted behind one and put him down with a chokehold. Isadora took the other with the butt of her knife, catching him behind the ear before he could shout. Her hands shook after, not from squeamishness, from urgency. The lock was old moon script. Griffin had changed the outer sigils, but not the root phrase. Regent arrogance. No one expects the shamed niece to remember the nursery lessons she was forced to memorize before she could shift. Isadora pressed bloody fingertips to the silver plate and whispered, "Stoneheart remembers." Runes flared. The door clicked. Inside, shelves ran floor to ceiling with bound decrees, tax rolls, blood registries. At the back sat a blackwood chest banded in iron thorns. She pried it open and found exactly what she had prayed and feared would be there: a thick ledger, leather darkened by handling, each page marked by Griffin's hand. Entry after entry. Royal issue, stillborn. Midwife compensated. Third moon sun removed before breath. Record amended. Twin girls drowned. Seer payment doubled for omen declaration. 50 years of fate written as purchase orders. Isadora made one sound, low and broken, then snapped the ledger shut and shoved it into the satchel with the letters. From somewhere deeper in the keep came a horn blast and a crowd roar. Eclipse had reached full shadow. "Taven," she said, voice raw. "Now." They sprinted. The oath hall doors were open to the night. Moonlight poured through the broken dome and turned every silver inlay to bone-white fire. Clan Alphas ringed the hall in full war colors, murmuring as Griffin Thornwood stood atop the central dais before the oath stone, arms spread in ritual authority. At the foot of the platform knelt 3 bound nursing mothers, faces streaked with tears and ash. A ceremonial blade hung above the first woman's throat on a pivoted chain. And beside Griffin, on a carved stand draped in white, sat an empty cradle lined with mooncloth. Waiting. "People of the realm," Griffin called, voice magnified by rite magic, "we gather to cleanse blight and secure succession." "Mother's claim." Isadora's shout cracked through the hall like lightning. Heads snapped toward the entrance. Gasps rippled. Someone whispered her stripped name like a ghost. She walked down the center aisle with snow in her hair, blood on her sleeve, her daughter strapped against her heart and the satchel of proof banging against her hip. Taven flanked her with blade drawn until council guards closed in. Then he peeled away to cut the hostage's wrist bindings at the edge of the crowd. Griffin's face drained, then reset into solemn outrage. "You dare profane this rite?" "I invoke Mother's claim under full moon," Isadora said, louder, each word a law key. "No alpha, regent, or council may silence me until witness is complete." Old wolves stiffened. Several elders bowed their heads in automatic assent. Law older than politics had been named. Griffin snarled, "Seize her." No one moved. Isadora climbed the dais steps, shaking but upright, and held the satchel high. "You called my child a curse. You called me barren. You called 50 years of missing heirs' fate." She threw the first packet of letters at his feet. Seals skidded across stone. "Here are your bribes to seers, your forged adultery testimony, your order to take my daughter warm for blood binding." The hall exploded into shouts. "Lies!" Griffin bellowed. "Then deny your hand." Isadora ripped the ledger out and flung it open to a marked page, voice turning savage. "Deny the payments to midwives for silent cradles. Deny the order to drown twin girls in the East Nursery. Deny this line: no royal issue is to survive first breath while regency is unsecured." Silence hit like a dropped axe. The eldest councilwoman, Marin of Ashvela, the same elder who had asked for mercy the night Isidora was banished, stepped forward with shaking hands. "Bring me that book." Isidora handed it over. Marin read 3 pages. 4. Her face went gray. "Moon, witness us," Marin whispered. Then louder. "This is authentic script and seal." A low growl rolled through the assembled packs. Griffin lunged. He didn't go for Isidora. He went for the sling. Instinct burned through thought. Isidora shifted mid-motion, bones cracking, fur flashing silver gray, and slammed into him at the waist. They crashed off the dais together, skidding across blood-slick stone toward the oath stone. On impact, the sling strap snagged on Griffin's wrist bracer and tore free. Her daughter wailed. A gray-haired attendant from the council ring lunged in, scooped the infant clear of trampling feet, and, with nowhere else shielded in the crush, back toward the ceremonial cradle beside the dais. Griffin struck first, elbow to her ribs. She bit his forearm and tasted rot fear under perfume and ritual oils. They shifted in jerks, half human, half wolf, brutal and messy. Isidora got him by the throat and drove him backward into the oathstone hard enough to split skin. "Say it!" She snarled inches from his face, forcing his head against carved law runes. "Say what you did!" He fought like a trapped boar, panic scent pouring off him now, rank and undeniable. Wolves in the ring recoiled as the truth hit their noses before their ears. "I kept order," Griffin spat. "The line was weak. You were weak." "Say it." "I killed what had to be killed," he roared, voice cracking. "Better a controlled regency than moon-mad blood on the throne." The confession went through the hall like a shockwave. Isidora's vision tunneled. She barely registered Darius and Lark exploding in through the south doors, both bloodied, both alive, as the crowd surged and reeled around them. Then Griffin went full wolf. His body snapped larger, black fur bristling, and he tore free of her grip with a spray of blood. Instead of turning on her, he pivoted and charged straight for the cradle stand, where the terrified attendant had retreated with Isidora's waking daughter. "No!" Isidora ripped a silver oath chain from the base of the right pillar, leapt, and whipped it around Griffin's neck as he lunged. The chain bit, sizzling where oath metal met oathbreaker skin. Griffin howled and dragged her 2 body lengths across stone. Darius hit him from the side with a shoulder check that sounded like timber splitting. Griffin slammed into a column, the cradle toppled. Lark dove and caught it before it struck. Griffin twisted, jaws wide, still straining toward the child. Isidora planted her heels, chain wrapped around both forearms, and hauled his head back until his throat was exposed. She shoved the ledger against his bloodied chest, pages fluttering in the torch wind. "You called my daughter a curse," she said, voice ringing in the stunned hall. "Because she is proof you stole 50 years." Griffin's eyes rolled white with hate. "I kept this realm alive. She would have ended it." Darius stepped in, wolf gold eyes locked on Griffin. "No, Griffin. You ended it." He seized Griffin's foreleg and snapped it at the elbow. Bone cracked loud and wet. Griffin screamed, collapsing to one side, chain still choking him. Isidora lifted her chin toward the council ring, breath sawing. "Under blood law and mother's claim, I name Griffin Thornwood guilty of royal infanticide, treason by forged right, and oathstone perjury. I demand sentence." No one looked away this time. Marin took the elder blade from its wall hooks and descended the dais steps. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "By witness of all clans," she said, "sentence is death." Griffin thrashed, half-shifted, foam at his jaws. "You can't. I am regent. I am—" The blade came down across his throat in one clean, practiced arc, blood sheeted black in moonlight. Griffin's body convulsed once, twice, then stilled under Isidora's chain. For a long beat there was only breathing. Then, one by one, alphas dropped to a knee. Not to Griffin, but to Isidora, to the child in Lark's shaking arms, to the truth laid open on stone. Darius went to Isadora first, hands hovering before he touched, waiting. She nodded. He steadied her as her knees threatened to buckle. Across the hall, Taven cut the last hostage free. The three mothers ran to their children in the crowd and sobbed into warm necks. Marin wiped Griffin's blood from the elder blade and turned to the scribes. Every decree bearing Thornwood's seal is void. Now, read the revocations before dawn. Scribes scrambled. Torchbearers ran. Outside, the eclipse began to pass. By sunrise, Griffin Thornwood's body burned on a pyre beyond the east gate. Isadora stood with Darius and watched until the last thorn seal ring melted in the coals. Night found them in the old moon chapel above the inner court, where cracked frescoes of ancient lunas watched over a single low fire. Their daughter slept in a basket of folded cloaks between them, one tiny fist open on her chest, crescent mark pale in the glow. The keep below still throbbed with aftermath. Council debates, healers, scribes reading revocations to exhausted crowds. But here, for the first time in months, no one was shouting Isadora's worth at her. Darius sat on the chapel floor, back against worn stone, shoulder freshly stitched, jaw shadowed and tired. He looked at her the way he had in the ravine before battle, direct, unguarded, asking rather than taking. "The bond's open," he said quietly, "but not complete." Isadora's pulse kicked. He flexed his injured hand once, then stilled it. "I won't finish it by instinct or pressure. Not tonight, not ever." His voice roughened. "Do you want this, Isadora? Now that you're free to say no?" No one had ever offered her a no with such reverence. She crossed the small space between them and knelt. "Yes," she whispered, louder, steady. "Yes, I choose you." Something in his face eased and sharpened at once. Relief, hunger, awe. He lifted a hand to her shoulder, paused until she inclined her head. Then he bent and kissed the scar there first, mouth warm against old damage, breath shaking just enough for her to feel it. Her skin pebbled. The half-formed bond hummed, rising. When his teeth finally pressed at the junction of neck and shoulder, it was controlled alpha force, deliberate and warned. Pain flashed bright, a white line through her nerves, and then heat surged behind it, liquid and fierce, pouring down her spine and blooming low in her belly. She gasped, fingers digging into his hair. The bite deepened for one heartbeat, sealing flesh, then he released and licked the wound in an ancient soothing gesture that made the pain turn molten. The bond roared open inside her like a second heartbeat slamming into time with her first. She felt him everywhere. The iron discipline he wore like armor, the old grief he never voiced, the savage protectiveness he had given her before she earned it, the wild tenderness he tried to hide behind command. "Mine," he whispered against her skin, voice wrecked. Isadora cupped his jaw and lifted his face. His eyes were full gold now, pupils blown wide, throat bared without demand. "My turn," she said. He went utterly still. Then, with visible effort, he tipped his head to expose the base of his throat, offering trust where dominance had always lived. Isadora ran her thumb once along the scar that cut from his jaw to collar, a map of all the places he'd survived, then sank her teeth into the hollow above his clavicle. He groaned, low and helpless, hands clamping at her hips but not forcing. The bite broke skin. His blood hit her tongue, hot and salt metallic. Pain sparked through him into her, then transformed just as hers had, heat flooding both of them, not one over the other, equal and answering. The bond slammed shut and settled, locked from both ends. Images flashed between them in rapid, wordless pulses. Him kneeling by a fire testing milk on his wrist, her on the oath dais, refusing to bow. Blackroot Pass, his body shielding hers, her chain on Griffin's throat. Their daughter's first cry in a ruined lean-to, moonlight on this chapel floor. Not ownership. Recognition. Darius pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard. Yours, he said. She smiled through sudden tears. Mine, and I am yours. Mate, he whispered, like prayer and oath at once. Mate. They stayed like that a long time, foreheads touching, hands mapping familiar and new. When the fire burned low, Isadora shifted and curled into his side. He wrapped around her carefully, wounded shoulder angled away, one broad hand spanning her marked shoulder as if memorizing the place where choice had become law. Between them, in the basket, their daughter sighed and slept, bond sense now quiet and deep as a well. For the first time since exile, Isadora's body did not brace for the next blow. The bond was no longer a wire pulled tight in fear. It was a home built in 2 heartbeats. 3 days later, the central courtyard of Moonspire Keep filled before noon. No eclipse shadow now, just clear winter sun striking banners newly sewn without thorn sigils. Clan leaders stood in ranked arcs around the oath dais. The 3 freed nursing mothers were there in front, babies bundled against their chests. Lark stood at Isadora's right with her arm in a sling and a grin she refused to hide. Taven, bruised and hoarse, leaned on a spear at Darius's side and looked like he might dare anyone to call this piece too soft. Marin stepped forward with the crown circlet that had once clattered at Griffin's boots. It had been reforged, the break at one side repaired, with a visible seam of bright silver. Isadora Stoneheart, Marin intoned, voice carrying over stone and sky. By blood witness, by mother's claim fulfilled, and by council assent of all gathered packs, do you accept oath as crown regent and mother guardian until the royal heir comes of age? Isadora looked down once at the silver-furred infant in her arms, then up at the wolves, who had watched her shamed, hunted, and now returned. I accept, she said. Marin set the circlet on her head. It was lighter than she remembered and far heavier than metal. Marin turned to Darius. Darius Windrider, do you swear war command to the realm under regent law, consort by chosen bond, with no claim over crown beyond oath and counsel? Darius's mouth quirked, scar pulling. I swear. He knelt, not to submit, but to seal, and Isadora touched his shoulder with 2 fingers. The new mating marks at both their throats gleamed faintly in the sun. No one missed them. Marin lifted the infant for all to see. Tiny fingers opened, crescent sigil clear on her left forepaw where fur thinned to skin. Let witness record, Marin said, voice breaking just slightly. Ira Stoneheart, first royal heir born and recognized in 50 years. A roar went up so loud the ravens startled from the parapets. One by one, rival alphas came forward and knelt to the child's height, offering oath tokens. Carved bone, iron rings, winter grain, river salt. Not fealty to fear. Protection sworn in public where it could be enforced. At the edge of the crowd, Isadora's former rejected mate stood under guard, wrists bound, awaiting tribunal for perjured witness named in Griffin's ledger. He did not meet her eyes. She did not look away. By dusk, scribes nailed the last revocation to the gatepost. Griffin's forged decrees were gone. That night, the same courtyard that had once hissed curse filled with drums and fire for Era's first shift festival blessing. Not a true shift, she was far too young, but an old custom. Pups lifted toward moonlight and welcomed by name. Lark danced badly with 2 toddlers hanging off her belt. Tavin pretended not to cry when one of the freed mothers pressed fresh bread into his hands. Darius stood behind Isadora, his chin briefly resting on her shoulder, and watched their daughter blink at sparks like she meant to command them. Still afraid of prophecy? Isadora murmured. He considered, then shook his head. Not afraid. His hand found hers, calloused fingers lacing tight. Respectful. She leaned back into him, feeling the settled bond, steady, chosen, alive. Below them, wolves who had once turned away now raised a single chant into the winter night. Heir, regent, mate. Their future was not soft. Borders still needed guarding. Graves still needed naming. Truth had left scars no coronation could erase. But as Iris squealed at the moon and Darius laughed into Isidora's hair, the realm finally sounded like something other than a lie. And this time, when the gates of Moonspire closed at night, they closed with her inside by choice.